I'm really stirring the pot with this video today. The old North versus South, and who's better? No, but seriously, why does everyone love South Tampa? And have you even heard of North Tampa? Well, I'll be diving into these two very different areas to help you get a feel for what it's like living here. And after all that smoke clears, I'm curious to hear which area you would choose. So buckle up, Buttercup, because we're jumping into it right now. Welcome if you are new to my channel and new to me. I'm Morejon and I make videos all about what it's like living in Tampa, Florida, covering the best neighborhoods and things to do so you can get a real feel for what it's like living here. If you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and ring that little bell because we have a ton of great content to share with you and we don't want you to miss anything. And if you're thinking of moving to Tampa, Florida, I am a licensed realtor, so see that number on the screen? Give us a call, shoot us a text, or send us an email because my team and I would love to help you find the perfect home for you and your family. Alright, so growing up in Tampa, when someone asks you, where do you live? Majority of people simply said North Tampa or South Tampa. Now this was back before the suburbs like Wesley Chapel or Brandon were a hot commodity. They were mostly farmland back then, and you could go hunting or riding dirt bikes. And don't get me wrong, a lot of old Tampa residents actually came from Ybor or West Tampa, which oddly enough is positioned right in between North and South, but it is a much smaller area, so majority of the people could be found in the North or the South, and the style of living here was very, very, very different. And much of those differences, they're actually still true today. So kicking things off, I want to go into detail explaining what the South Tampa and North Tampa areas are like. Then later in the video, we're going to go ahead and compare the two for you. South Tampa is known to some as the affluent epicenter of Tampa. South Tampa covers a large area in the city of Tampa, and being a peninsula is mostly surrounded by the beautiful water views the Tampa Bay offers. Its borders to the north is Kennedy Avenue, and to the south is MacDill Air Force Base. South Tampa's history dates all the way back to the 1800s, but most of the buildings started in the early 1900s. Much of its history can be found in the older, historic areas like Hyde Park and Palmacia, but its true beauty is in the variety it offers. For those of you looking for new construction, you can find it in South Tampa, but it's usually a custom home builder that knocked down a smaller, older home and just built vertically. For the most part, much of the city living is on a grid versus having walled, planned communities. And the areas flow into the next with as little as a sign on a corner naming the different areas. Much of the city is older, but that's also what the charm is. Now, from craftsman-style bungalows in Hyde Park to sprawling estates in Palmacia and up and down Bayshore Boulevard, you will really have a nice variety of architecture to choose from. Living in the city, we do have a public bus system, but for the most part, everyone drives around. Parking at public places like grocery stores typically isn't a problem, and while there is traffic, you can get around pretty easily compared to the other major cities. Many people that live in South Tampa love how easy it is to access the interstate system that'll take you to downtown, to the airport, and even over to the beaches. So what type of people choose to live in South Tampa? Well, the funny thing is you'll find a good mix from young families to professionals, even retirees. There are over 20 different neighborhoods in South Tampa, and they all have something unique about them. Families love the fact that Plant High School and the associated elementary and middle schools or feeder schools are all top A-rated schools and some of the most sought after. Professionals love being located between our two business districts of West Shore and, of course, downtown. And retirees, well, you can find some nice quaint areas like Davis Island where it feels like you're always on vacation, and quite frankly there are some really great areas to go for a walk or a nice bike ride and just enjoy the weather that Tampa offers. One thing that South Tampa offers that most of Tampa and the surrounding areas lacks is an option for walkability. Our walkable areas include Bayshore Boulevard, which is the longest continuous boardwalk or sidewalk in the world, Hyde Park Village where you'll see runners and joggers daily, and of course Davis Island, which is full of amenities for the locals. But honestly, unless you live near these areas, Tampa doesn't really have a specific location where you can walk out of your home and just everything's right there. The only other exception to this is if you lived in downtown condo or right next to the Riverwalk and have access to that. But speaking of the Riverwalk, I think it's amazing. And if you have a chance, check out my video because I walked the entire Riverwalk to show you what it offers. Bayshore Boulevard used to be the only long walkable area, but now that connects to downtown, which connects to the Riverwalk, and you can truly go for a long trek if you choose to do so. In a nutshell, When I think of South Tampa, I think of the one area in Tampa that has the boutique shopping, weekly entertainment options, and some of the city's best restaurants. While geographically, South Tampa isn't the center of the city, it sure feels like it when living there. All of the best dining, from Burns Steakhouse to great breakfast spots like Daps and Daily Eats. If I'm going out with my wife, South Tampa is always in the mix when figuring out a place for a nice night out on the town. And here's the funny thing I want to share with you. When I talk to people that are looking to move to Tampa, it's funny to hear that some people cancel out the city from the get-go. Tampa, as a city, is great living. Are there parts that can be a little rough, as in every city? Yes, of course. But for the most part, Tampa is a pretty safe city, and I go out with my wife all of the time, and we love just walking around. Just a few weeks ago, we walked the entire Riverwalk from downtown Channelside all the way to Armature Works, 2.5 miles at 10 p.m. And there were people out skating, riding bikes, families with kids. Not my kids. My kids turn into little gremlins if they stay up past 8 p.m. But you saw kids and people walking dogs. It was totally safe. And one of our favorite things to do is to park and walk Bayshore and look at the old monster homes in the area. We just walk the boulevard or down the streets and it's pretty out. Tampa is a very different city. While it is labeled as a big city, and population-wise and now popularity-wise, it is a top city, but it still has a small city or even a big town feel at times. So don't cancel out the city vibe without experiencing it first. Living in South Tampa, you have some of the best dining, shopping, and entertainment at your footsteps. Easy access to downtown and Channelside, and it doesn't get much easier to get over to St. Pete and those amazing, beautiful beaches. Now I know I painted a pretty picture and made South Tampa out to be the best thing since sliced bread, but it does have some downfalls. First off, it's tough to get into South Tampa. It's such a sought after area, you better be ready to fight for a nice home. And when I mean ready, you better bring your checkbook because it's one of the priciest areas in Tampa. Being surrounded by water, you almost always have to assume you'll need flood insurance. Not always, but mostly. And if you're the type that likes new homes, first understand that living in the city, most of the homes are older. So if you find a new home, it's only because they knocked a smaller home down and built vertical, and you might still be next to an older, smaller home. All in all, each area has its pros and cons, but South Tampa has so many pros, it's hard to ignore it as a top area of Tampa. Now, taking a quick pause to say, I hope you enjoy my videos, and if you want to learn more about Tampa, make sure to head over to my channel, as I do cover tons of areas to give you a feel for what it's like living in Tampa, and I do love hearing your feedback from you, so please leave your comments below. Now, no matter how pretty that picture looks, living in the city just isn't for everyone. Some people can't get over living on the grid, or how busy it is, or want more of a community vibe versus everything flowing into each other. Well, those people, the ones that I was just talking about, they typically can be found in North Tampa. North Tampa is what you would call Tampa's original suburbs. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, when you drive north of Kennedy, you really start to feel like you're leaving South Tampa. But when you cross the Midtown area near the interstate, you pretty much know, okay, I'm somewhere else. That's because you're in West Tampa. If you keep traveling north up Dale Mabry, which is one of our main highways in the city, you'll realize that it's short-lived and you hit somewhat of a dead zone. Between the Buck Stadium in West Tampa and Bush Boulevard, you pretty much drive past just a bunch of commercial areas. I mean, there are homes, but it's not the same. Then you go over the Bush Boulevard Bridge and you know immediately that you're in the suburbs. The area hasn't changed much, as it was built in 1970s and 80s at this point, so it's not like Wesley Chapel where everything feels like it's 10 years old or newer, but it definitely feels different. You will immediately start to see Starbucks, Target, Carrabba's Italian Restaurant, or Chili's. You get that chain store feeling and you just know a Bed Bath & Beyond and a Home Goods is nearby, which it actually is. You, my friend, are entering North Tampa. North Tampa is comprised of many different communities and there is no defined boundaries as there is with South Tampa, but locals just know to call it North Tampa. The first major area you come to in North Tampa when crossing the Bush Boulevard Bridge is Carrollwood. Greater Carrollwood is actually made up of original Carrollwood and Carrollwood Village, and between the two, there's over 4,500 homes. These two areas are coined one of the best communities in Tampa and has so much to offer. There's a neighborhood ski lake, a championship golf course, parks and trails, a cultural center, and driving through Carrollwood, you can see the pride in home ownership. Most of the homes in Carrollwood were built between 1970 and the 1980s, but most of the area is still very, very well maintained. I personally love the architecture and the variety in the home designs, and aside from the tree-lined streets, one of my favorite characteristics is that you'll find space between the homes. It's really easy to find a quarter-acre lot here with cul-de-sacs and sidewalks, and just a tad north on the east side of Del Mabry, you'll find Lake Magdalene, which is somewhat mimics Carrollwood, and to the northwest, you'll find Northdale area, which is also known as a nice golf course community. Because you have all of these communities in such a concentrated area, as you drive up and down Del Mabry, you will notice that you have everything you need in the area and you don't have to drive elsewhere. Even though you're only 15 minutes or so from the city, you have your own grocery stores, your restaurants, your movie theaters, Orange Theory Fitness, or local gyms, and on and on. And if luxury is what you're looking for, Avila is an affluent neighborhood in North Tampa and is considered to be one of the most exclusive communities in all of Tampa. The gated community is occupied by star athletes, socialites, and professionals, and includes an 18-hole golf course redesigned by the famed golfer Jack Nicklaus in 1988. And just because you aren't technically living in the city, doesn't mean that you don't have easy access to things. North Tampa is pretty perfectly wedged right between the Veterans Expressway to the west and I-275 to the east, so you can easily get around the city or over to our famous beaches. The biggest difference with living in South Tampa versus North Tampa is really the pace of living. South Tampa gives off a more active vibe where there are walkable areas and a little more variety. You also have a super easy access to everything, so it somewhat begs you to get out and just get moving. The downside is that it can get expensive, and you do not have the true neighborhood feel with a walled community. While you do have a community, and yes, most of the neighborhoods are friendly, and it's not like your neighbor is a stranger, you just don't get the walled-in, planned communities like you do in the north. In North Tampa, you have a more settled feeling. Communities are planned and have structure, and there are parks and playgrounds filled with kids. And while there are a bunch of families, you don't have to have kids to fit in. There is a good mix in North Tampa. Now, living in South Tampa, you really can't beat the eclectic and boutique restaurants, but it's not like you're starving if you live in North Tampa. There are plenty of options to choose from, so you really never have to leave if you don't want to. I have lived in both the city and the suburbs, and I definitely had pros and cons that I had to weigh out. But overall, my preference brought me back into the city because my family is constantly on the go, and we love going out and trying new things. While we love our home and our neighbors, we simply don't stop and love the variety that living in the city offers. But there is a lid for every pot, so you really need to discover your lifestyle and what areas fit you best. It's honestly somewhat of a feeling. Truth be told, I could happily live in both areas and be absolutely content. But I challenge you to explore both areas to see which fits you best. If you're planning a move to the Tampa Bay area, please reach out. See that number on the screen? Give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email, because my team and I would love to help you and your family find your next home. And until that next video, I'll catch you later.